Pakistan is one of the most beautiful countries that I have ever traveled to. And even though it is far from being a popular tourist destination, the number of international tourists who visit Pakistan has been increasing year after year. Still, the logistics of traveling to Pakistan as a foreigner can be quite complicated, and as beautiful as Pakistan is, it really doesn't have a great tourism infrastructure, so there are a lot of things that you need to know if you want to travel to Pakistan as a foreign tourist. So in this video, I'm going to tell you everything that you need to know to travel to Pakistan, and I'm also going to share a little bit of my experience as a foreign tourist in the country. If you're new here, hi, my name is Laura. I've been traveling all over the world for the past few years, and in this channel I share lots of travel vlogs, hidden gems, and travel information videos like this one. So if that sounds like something you like to watch, make sure you subscribe. But for now, let's go back into the video. So the first thing you need to know when you travel to a new country is whether you need a visa to enter or not, and what your visa requirements are. So your visa requirements are going to depend on what passport you have and on your nationality. So I cannot give information for all passports and all nationalities, but I will leave the Pakistan immigration website down below in the description so you can check your visa requirements for your particular passport. Personally, I have a European Union passport, and the requirements that I had was that I needed to fill up an e-visa application, which I would say was easy, but it was very long. There were lots and lots of questions on that form. I also had to submit a photocopy of my passport, a photo of myself, and an LOI. So LOI stands for Letter of Invitation, and it's basically a letter that your tour company or someone that you're visiting in Pakistan will write and that you will present to the Pakistani government along with your visa documents so that they can review it and approve your visa application. So in my case, my tour company provided an LOI, and you also need to know that if you're traveling to certain areas in Pakistan, you also have to apply for something called an NOC. NOC stands for Non-Objection Certificate, and it's basically a special travel permit that the Pakistani government issues for tourists who want to go to particularly high-risk areas and areas where the Pakistani government considers that there is a security threat for tourists. So most of the touristic areas in Pakistan do not require an NOC at all. There is no restrictions on the places that you can go in Gilgit-Baltistan, which is the most touristic region of the country, but there are also no restrictions in Punjab, Sindh, and Islamabad. The regions which do require NOCs are Balochistan and the tribal areas, which are generally considered to be pretty unstable and unsafe for tourism, as well as the regions of Azad Kashmir and occasionally the Swat Valley, which is a bit more touristic and is not as high risk, but there's still a certain danger associated with traveling to Swat Valley. If you want to access any of these areas, you have to apply for an NOC with the Pakistani government, and with the exception of Swat, you must know that most of these NOCs are denied. Very, very few foreigners manage to go into Balochistan, the tribal areas, and especially Azad Kashmir. However, there is a loophole to get into Balochistan if you access it by crossing the Iranian-Pakistani border. In that case, you will be assigned a guard when you enter Balochistan at the border, and the armed guard will go with you until you exit Balochistan. So this is a bit of a loophole, but mind you, this is not recommended for safety reasons. There are other situations where you may be assigned armed guards. The Pakistani government takes the safety of its tourists pretty seriously, so if you go to places such as the valleys of Chitral and Kailash, you may also be assigned guards there, and in other areas in the mountains as well. However, if you're traveling in cities like Islamabad or Lahore, no one is going to assign a guard to you. A lot of people wonder whether Pakistan is a safe country to travel to and whether it's safe for women to travel to, and there is no simple answer to this. It is not 100% yes it is safe or 100% no it is safe. The reality is that Pakistan has regions that are very, very safe, like I said, Gilgit-Baltistan, Punjab, Sindh, Islamabad, and it has regions such as Balochistan or the tribal areas which are very, very unsafe. And there are also regions which are kind of in the middle, like Swat Valley, Karachi, Azad Kashmir, Chitral, Kailash. So if you want to know more about safety in Pakistan, I made an entire video dedicated to that topic, so I will link it in the description so you watch it after this one. Something else that you have to know if you're planning on traveling to Pakistan is how to dress in the country and what to wear. So Pakistan doesn't have any laws that tell you what you can and cannot wear. Technically, you can wear anything in Pakistan and it would be legal. It is not like, for example, neighboring Iran, which does have some pretty strict laws about dress and dress codes. However, the fact that you can wear just about anything doesn't mean that it is smart to do so. Legally, you can wear a bikini in the streets of Pakistan, but that is not a smart thing to do. So, in my experience, I was not well informed when I first traveled to Pakistan and I didn't dress appropriately at all times. So, I was misinformed by a few YouTube videos that said that wearing jeans and t-shirts is relatively common in Islamabad, for example, and I found that that was not the case at all, and I stood out a lot by what I was wearing on top of being a tourist, which is already rare in the country. So I felt pretty stared at, and I definitely had the awareness that I was not appropriately dressed. What I came to learn is that for women, the best way to dress is to wear either a quarter or a long sleeve, to wear some pretty loose clothes, loose trousers, loose shirts, nothing that will hug your body shape, and nothing that will show off your curves. And if you have a shirt that kind of covers your bum, then that is better. You do not have to wear a veil or a hijab in Pakistan if you don't want to. I do recommend that you carry one around, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But it is not mandatory. And when you're up in the mountains in places like Gilgit-Baltistan, in areas that are not conservative, this is something important, in areas that are not particularly conservative, it is okay to wear long trousers and a t-shirt if you're going hiking or something like that. It is an area that sees a lot of hikers and mountaineers, so it is seen as a much more normal thing over there. At least for tourists, it is seen as normal. Let me clarify that. But if you want to dress appropriately in the cities, I do recommend that you consider buying some Pakistani clothes online before you leave for your trip. Particularly if you're traveling solo as a woman, I would really encourage you to do this just so you blend in a little bit better. So a brand that I was recommended that sells a lot of Pakistani clothes is a brand called Ethnic. So I will link it in the description if you want to check it out. For men, the typical dress in Pakistan is something called a shalwar kameez. It's basically loose trousers and a loose shirt that is pretty long. It goes almost up to your knees, and it is usually a solid color, so it's usually solid brown, white, blue, or black. And you can definitely find a lot of these in Pakistan. I've definitely seen a lot of tourists, like male tourists in Pakistan, who wear shalwar kameez. But men are also not subject to the same standards as women when it comes to clothing. So I do think it is more acceptable for men to wear just jeans and a t-shirt and no one will bat an eyelid. It is also worth mentioning that while there are no restrictions on what you can and cannot wear in the streets of Pakistan, there are often restrictions on what you can wear if you want to enter a mosque. So there is something called mosque etiquette, which is, the correct way to behave and to dress in a mosque. And if you're going to visit places of worship and you want to be culturally respectful and respectful of religion, I really, really encourage you to follow this etiquette. And if you don't follow it, you might not even be allowed in. So for women, you have to dress modestly if you want to enter a mosque, and you have to cover your hair with a headscarf or a veil. And this is why I mentioned earlier that it is a very good idea to carry a headscarf with you, because you can put it on if you want to enter a mosque and then take it off once you're outside in the street. That is what I personally chose to do, and it worked really well for me. And also, if you have some sort of wardrobe malfunction, a scarf can come in super handy to cover yourself. And well, again, technically you can wear whatever you want in Pakistan. That doesn't mean it is a smart thing to do. It is still a very conservative country, and it is not smart or culturally respectful to go around showing skin. So a headscarf can really help you in that kind of situation. And I actually had a situation like that. So take it from me, take a headscarf with you wherever you go. Thank me later. Men should also dress modestly when they enter mosques. There are actually mosques where I saw signs that men couldn't enter if they were wearing shorts. You had to wear long trousers, and of course they're not required to cover their hair. Men are not subject to as high standards as women when it comes to clothing, even in mosques. And for both genders, most of the time you have to take off your shoes when you enter a place of worship. Okay, so moving on to the next point. If you're traveling to Pakistan, you have to get used to being the center of attention. So this is something that I've talked about a lot in my previous videos because it was a huge culture shock for me. But basically, it is pretty rare to find a foreign tourist in Pakistan. It is still not a very popular destination with international tourists. So whenever locals spot a foreigner, they are naturally very curious. So they will stare, like really, really stare. And they will come up to you and ask for photos. They will ask for selfies. And this can be very difficult to manage if you're not used to it. It was definitely difficult for me to manage. I found the staring very uncomfortable, even though it is not malicious, and I've said this 1,000 times. There is no bad intention behind this. People truly have no ill will, but it still is uncomfortable just because I'm not used to it at all. And where I come from in Spain, staring is considered quite rude, but it was very uncomfortable for me at times. And during the times where I didn't dress appropriately, the staring was even more intense, so it was extra uncomfortable. And there were occasions when I did say no to having a photo taken, when I just didn't want to take a photo with someone or I was advised not to. And for the most part, people understood and didn't insist, but I have definitely heard from other travelers that they have had bad experiences with people insisting that they want photos with them, and it has become quite an uncomfortable situation. For me, the only uncomfortable situation that I encountered when it came to photos is that I noticed as I was walking in certain places that people put their phones at me and zoomed in, and I could tell that they were taking photos of me without asking for permission. And actually, the other day, as I was scrolling through TikTok, I came across a video of myself that was taken during my trip to Pakistan, and I was not aware that someone was filming me, and then they posted it online, and I was just minding my own business and I came across this video of myself, and it was so jarring and so uncomfortable, and I absolutely hated that. I'm not gonna lie. It was also a really, really bad video of me and a really unflattering video, so I found that to be particularly wrong. But that is just the reality of traveling to Pakistan as a foreign tourist, so hopefully you won't have the same situation where you find yourself being posted on social media without any sort of permission or knowledge beforehand, but that is quite rare. I don't know of anyone else who has had the same experience, so for the most part, it is just the staring and the people asking for selfies, and usually there are no bad situations, but there definitely can be. And if you're traveling as a solo female traveler, this can be particularly difficult to manage because I traveled to Pakistan with a male relative, so while it was uncomfortable when people stared at me, it was just that. But I also have experience traveling solo in other countries such as Morocco, Portugal, Tanzania, and I know that when people stare at me when I'm alone, when I'm a solo traveler, I don't just feel uncomfortable, I feel unsafe. So even though the situation isn't truly unsafe, like I said, people don't stare maliciously, it can definitely be very jarring and difficult to manage. Another question people have about traveling to Pakistan is whether you can drink alcohol in the country. So Pakistan is an Islamic republic and alcohol is banned for all Muslims, but it is not technically impossible to find alcohol. Drinking alcohol is permitted for the small Christian and Hindu minorities that live in Pakistan, as well as other religious minorities. And there is actually a local Pakistani beer called Muri beer, which actually has a really fascinating history. So the Muri brewery was established in 1860 to meet the demands of British military and the civilian personnel stationed at Goragali near the resort town of Muri in northern Pakistan, which from what I hear is a very beautiful area of Pakistan. It is very wooded and mountainous and very green. In the 1880s, the company grew and it established a further brewery in Rawalpindi and a distillery in Quetta. And it was a very successful company. However, it faced a major setback in 1947 with the partition of India and Pakistan, since it lost the entirety of the Indian market. The company suffered yet another significant setback in 1977 when Prime Minister Ali Bhutto imposed a total alcohol prohibition in Pakistan. Subsequently, the government of President General Zia-ul-Haq amended this law, requiring anyone wishing to consume alcohol to present credentials demonstrating that they were not Muslim. Today, the Marie Brewery produces beer, vodka, gin, and whiskey, and it is the only company which is allowed to produce and sell alcoholic beverages in Pakistan, and it is illegal to import alcohol into Pakistan, so it is the only beer and alcohol available today. So you obviously don't need to know the history of this company in Pakistan, but I thought it was an interesting piece of history, so I decided to include it here. And technically, it is possible to consume alcohol when you're in Pakistan. If you're a tourist and you're not Muslim, technically you can drink Marie beer or vodka, gin, and whiskey. However, that was not my experience when I traveled to Pakistan. So when I was in Pakistan, I encountered two German tourists in Hunza who had tried to get their hands on some alcohol, and they had asked around, and everyone told them that they would not serve them alcohol at different hotels and restaurants. And they even went as far as to say that because they're German, they can't sleep without drinking alcohol, which is the biggest bullshit that I've ever heard in my life. But anyways, they still could not get their hands on alcohol. And when they explained this to one of the guides that I had in Hunza, he said that the government did not allow tourists to consume alcohol, that certain people had suggested that maybe allowing tourists to consume alcohol might attract more tourists to the country, but the government's response had been that if that was the case, they would suspend all tourism to Pakistan. No one was drinking alcohol in Pakistan. So do what you want with that information. I do not know if this is actually true or not. If you're Pakistani, let me know in the comments what you think, whether you think tourists should be allowed to drink alcohol or not, and whether it is actually allowed or not. Nightlife as we know it in the West also doesn't quite exist in Pakistan. I'm sure there are parties and stuff, but there really isn't a clubbing culture or a going out culture or parties that have alcohol. So when you're in Pakistan, I really recommend that you try to immerse yourself into local culture, that you drink the things that locals drink, and eat the things that locals eat, and there will always be time for alcohol and for parties when you're back home. So moving on to food, there are a few things that you have to know about food in Pakistan, and this was actually one of the things that worried me the most. So the first thing that you have to know is that the food is spicy. So if you have a low spice tolerance, I really suggest that you talk to your guide or your driver about it and let them help you out. There are definitely dishes in Pakistan that do not have spice. One of my favorite ones was Kabuli pulao, which is basically, I think it's an Afghan dish. It's the national dish of Afghanistan, and it's rice with some kind of meat. Usually it's chicken or beef or mutton. And it also has carrots and raisins, and it's absolutely delicious. I really, really loved it. But other dishes like biryani, which is very typical in Pakistan, are very, very spicy. Delicious, but incredibly hot and spicy. Secondly, Pakistan is a meat lover's paradise, so pretty much every dish here has meat. And of course there are exceptions. People eat vegetables too. Like I ate some delicious vegetable pakoras up in Gilgit-Baltistan, but a lot of dishes will have meat, so it will be very difficult for you to find appropriate food if you're vegan or vegetarian. So if that is the case for you, definitely plan in advance, talk to your guide or your driver about it, and make peace with the fact that you're probably not going to have a lot of variety in the food that you eat, and you're probably going to find yourself eating a lot of plain rice. Speaking of variety, whether you're vegan or not, assume that you're going to eat a lot of rice and chicken during your time in Pakistan. From all of the food vlogs that I watched online, I know that Pakistan has a very varied cuisine, and Pakistani cuisine is very, very, very good. But as a foreigner, I actually found it very hard to find this variety, because a lot of the times when I would go to hotels or restaurants, they would have very extensive menus with lots of food options. But the reality is that most of those food options ended up not being available. And this didn't happen just at one or two restaurants. It happened in a lot of places all throughout the country. So almost all the time I ended up ordering pretty much the same thing, which was like kabuli pulao, biryani, karahi, and it does get a little bit repetitive and tiring. So if you want variety in food, I do think you have to do your research and know what you're ordering, because a lot of the time I also just did not know what to order. And also maybe talk to your guide and your driver about it and have someone help you out in that sense. Food servings in Pakistan are also quite large, so just know that if you're ordering for one person, you're really ordering for two, and you're gonna eat a lot. Like, the food in Pakistan is, again, it is delicious, and it will really, really fill you up. Something else that you will also eat a lot of is naan, which is bread. I really liked the garlic naan, and you will also eat a lot of chai, which is tea. And it is a sign of hospitality, so a lot of people will offer you chai when you arrive in a hotel, or if they just want to be nice and hospitable, they will offer you chai. Lastly, when you're traveling, you always have to be a bit more careful about what you eat, particularly if you have a sensitive stomach. So make sure you talk to a healthcare provider or a doctor if this is your situation. And whenever you travel to a foreign country, it's a good idea to drink only Nestle water, which is basically purified water, so water from a water bottle, and never drink anything from the tap, not even to brush your teeth. If you're traveling to the north, particularly to Gilgit-Baltistan, which is one of the very touristic areas, you should consider altitude sickness. So I experienced altitude sickness when I was in Pakistan, and I wasn't at none of the places that I visited were super, super, super high. The highest that I was 4,200 meters above sea level, and I didn't do any hiking at that altitude. The highest that I hiked was maybe like 2,800 meters or like 3,000 meters, something like that. But even then, I was really, really struggling just because I am not used to the height at all. I have never been that high in my life. So if you're in a similar situation as me, maybe consider doing easier hikes and not pushing yourself too much, planning a little bit in advance. I actually have a travel vlog where I talk a bit more in depth about my personal situation and my personal experience when it came to altitude sickness. And of course, everyone's experience is going to differ, but I think hearing other people's experiences can also be very helpful. So I will link that vlog in the description if you want to watch it as well. It is my vlog about Deosai National Park. I want to talk very briefly about everything that you can see in Pakistan. And Pakistan is a huge country. There's lots that you can see over there. But the thing that attracts the tourists the most is often the mountains in the north, in Gilgit-Baltistan. So Pakistan has some of the highest mountains in the world. It has 5 mountains over 8,000 meters, and it has some truly spectacular nature. So some popular tourist spots are Fairy Meadows, Deosai National Park, which I already mentioned, Hunza, Skardu. So I posted vlogs of all of those places, as well as Islamabad and Lahore, which are also very popular tourist spots. Islamabad is the capital city of Pakistan. Lahore is often considered its cultural capital. It is a city in Punjab, and it is absolutely beautiful. And Punjab and the southern province of Sindh also have lots of cities and lots of historical and architectural sites that are simply fascinating. Sindh and Punjab are definitely the places where you should go if you want to explore Pakistani history and culture. But more importantly than that is how to get around the country. So you can try to get around with public transportation, but you do need a whole lot of research before you do this, and I would not recommend it. The best way to get around, in my opinion, is to go by road. However, traffic in Pakistan is absolutely crazy. It is insanity, and some of the roads up north especially are just absolutely crazy. I have no words to describe it. So I don't really recommend that you drive on your own. I recommend that you hire a driver. It is relatively cheap in Pakistan, especially for foreign tourists. Cost of living in Pakistan is relatively cheap, so drivers are pretty affordable, and I really, really do recommend you get one. The other option is that you fly. Pakistan International Airlines has a lot of domestic flights within the country, so one of the most popular ones, for example, is the flight from Islamabad to Skardu up in the north, but this is of course much more expensive. And when it comes to where to stay and hotels, listen, Pakistan doesn't have a super well-developed tourist infrastructure, and it is not a very touristic country, even though the numbers of international tourists are increasing year after year. Its tourism industry, it's still in its infancy, so a lot of the hotels are not the best, to put it bluntly. In the cities like Islamabad, Lahore, Karachi, you're not going to have a problem finding good hotels, but especially if you go up north, you're definitely going to have to forgive a lot of flaws. So for example, while I was up north, there were, most of the time I was showering with cold water. There wasn't warm water in most hotels. And I did stay at some pretty cool hotels. Like I really liked the Raikot Sarai in Fairy Meadows, Glamp Pakistan in Skardu, Shangri-La Resort also in Skardu. I didn't stay there, but it looks amazing. But there were also some hotels which were not great. And sometimes, even though these hotels weren't great, they were the best option in a certain town or in a certain area. So like I said, you might have to forgive a lot of flaws. And I would not recommend that you go for super low budget hotels because you might have to forgive a lot of flaws in those hotels. Basically, have high expectations for the country because it is very, very beautiful, but don't have high expectations for your accommodation because you will be disappointed. Anyways, that was a pretty long video, a bit longer than I intended it to be initially, but I hope you found it useful. I hope this helps you when planning your trip to Pakistan. And if you did like the video, if you did think it was useful, make sure you leave a like, you leave a comment, and make sure you subscribe for more videos like this.